Good evening, everyone. We're going to call tonight's meeting to order. We're going to start with the approval of the agenda. Can I have a mover and a seconder that tonight's agenda be approved? Councillor Andrews and Councillor Stevens, all in favor? And that is carried. Are you good there, Andy? Thank you. Tonight we had no closed session, so we will, disclosures of direct and indirect pecuniary interest. Was there any tonight? Seeing none, we will rise for the singing of our national anthem if you're able, please.
O Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
We would like to acknowledge the treaty lands and territory of the Williams Treaty Nations and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. We also recognize that Dufferin County is the traditional territory of the Wendat and the Haudenosaunee and is home for many Indigenous people today. Tonight's meeting is being aired on public television and or streamed live and may be taped for later public broadcast or webcast. Your name is part of the public record and will be included in the minutes of tonight's meeting. Any member of the public connecting via telephone is reminded to press *6 to mute and unmute. Please remain muted until the chair requests comments or questions from the public. Before I turn the chair over to Deputy Mayor Taylor to begin our public meetings, I just wanted to make a quick announcement that, as you'll notice, we're all wearing purple today. The men are in ties and the ladies are in scarves, and that is because today we officially proclaimed November 25th as the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women, and November is Women Abuse Prevention Month. Our local women's shelter, Family Transition Place, takes part in the Wrapped in Courage campaign, which is why we're all wearing purple tonight. So thank you all, Council, for joining me, and CAO Smith as well for wearing your purple tie as well tonight. At this time, I'd like to turn the chair over to Deputy Mayor Taylor for the public meetings.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Tonight, 8.1 is the false alarm bylaw, 2024-006. Anyone who would like to speak to this matter can call 1-289-801-5774 and enter conference ID 140-845-418#. Callers will be invited to provide their questions or comments following the conclusion of the meeting presentation. Any member of the public connecting via telephone is reminded to press *6 to mute and unmute. And see if there's anyone who wants to be notified of further consideration of this topic. You need to submit your name, your phone number, mailing address, and email address to Clerk's Department at orangeville.ca or call 519-940-0440 extension 2242 and reference the false alarm bylaw 2024-006. Any information that's collected is a matter of public record. So at this time, I'd like to call on James Bramley, who will be speaking about the licensing and bylaw enforcement from the supervisory position about this topic.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Taylor. I'm going to speak on the false alarm bylaw and put together a quick presentation for your review. To get started, we're going to speak to the timeline of the history of the proposal of this bylaw. Back in July of 2022, Council directed staff to assess the false alarm data provided by the OPP. January of 2023, staff initiated an education program where businesses and residents were notified if a security alarm system was set off accidentally, and the OPP was dispatched to attend. In September of this year, staff presented council with a report on this information, which brings us here today to have this public meeting to receive feedback on the proposed bylaw. Is intended for Q1 of next year to staff have report back to council on the feedback received in relation to the proposed false alarm bylaw. Background on this bylaw: the false alarm data collection program that was started in January 1st of 2023. As a result of council's direction of 2022, bylaw staff initiated a false alarm data collection program to analyze the frequency of false alarm calls and their financial impact on the municipality in anticipation of the 3-year OPP contract coming to an end in 2024. Staff utilized the bi-weekly data provided by OPP to log and review false alarm details and would result in a false alarm education notice being distributed to property owners and or the alarm system owner. The OPP provincial billing model. In 2024, the town transitioned from a 3-year OPP contract into a provincial billing model whereby the municipality will now pay a base billing amount for the policing and as well to be billing at each call for service. Staff has calculated an estimation of the financial impact that false alarm occurrences under the billing category operational 2 will have on the municipality in 2024, and it is the opinion that with the implication of this bylaw, the unnecessary strain on police resources and the cost of the municipality will be mitigated. The proposed false alarm bylaw has been designated to create an administrative framework that decreases the number of false alarm calls for service, provide cost recovery for the program administration and associated OPP billing costs, provide a consistent approach with regulations set out by the town's existing regulatory bylaws, and include best practices surrounding municipalities' false alarm bylaws, relevant legislation, and court decisions. A summary of the proposed regulations includes a definition of what a false alarm bylaw is, and it is any alarm incident where there is no evidence that an unauthorized entry or unlawful entry has been attempted or made into or on respect of the building, structure, or premises, and is not limited to the activation of alarm system during testing, an alarm system being activated by mechanical failure, malfunction, faulty equipment, or inappropriate placement of motion detectors or battery failure, an alarm system being activated by atmospheric conditions, vibrations, power failure, or an animal, alarm systems that are not being maintained, cleaned, or activated by user error. Speaking to the regulations, an alarm system owner and registered title owner of the property containing an alarm system is responsible to ensure at all times that the alarm system is kept in good working order and condition, and that all users and owners of the subject premises are kept fully apprised of the operation of the alarm system. The alarm system owner and the registered title owner of the property containing alarm system, which at fault alarm is occurring or responded to by the police services shall be jointly liable and pay the town's fees set out in the bylaw. Where there is a police service response to an at-fault occurrence, the town shall, upon receipt of the data analyst report on a first fault alarm, the fee shall be imposed on the alarm system owner or the registered title owner of the property as set out by the bylaw. On a second and subsequent at-fault alarm occurrence within a 12-month period at the same premises, an increased fee shall be imposed on the alarm system owner and or the registered title owner of the property as set out in the bylaw. The town shall be provided with a data analyst report outlining the at-fault alarm occurrences for the administration of this bylaw by the police services. The data analyst report to include sufficient information related to the occurrence of the at-fault, the frequency of the submissions, that the towns will be provided a minimum monthly basis to ensure the town can provide the required notice in a manner of the alarm system owner. If the fees are not paid within an applicable time, shall be added to the tax roll in accordance to the Municipal Act. And we've also added a schedule to this to dictate what the fees are. On a first occurrence will be $150, and all subsequent occurrences within the 12-month period of that first occurrence will be $300.
That's excellent. Thank you, James. So at this time, I'd like to invite questions or comments from the public regarding this alarming matter. Any members of the public connecting via telephone is reminded, press star 6 and mute and unmute. Did you catch that? It's an alarming matter. Thank you very much. Yes. Seeing none. Anyone from council alarmed by this report? Councillor Sherwood is alarmed. Please go ahead. Oh, and Councillor Andrews, you'll be next.
Thank you, through you, Deputy Mayor. One of the things I noticed in your report was that you were going, if it's unpaid, that it would be added to the tax roll as per the Municipal Act. In the situation where a business isn't necessarily, say it's a business that had the false alarm, but they're not necessarily the building owner, they're a tenant. Would that hold up in court if it's put on the property owner's tax bill when the property owner isn't the business owner?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, through you. As for the bylaw, we've dictated that it is the registered owner of the property and or the owner of the alarm system. So all parties involved with the false alarm or the occurrence will be responsible. And this falls under many different bylaws that if there's a tenant or the property owner, they both can be liable as under the Municipal Acts.
Councillor Sherwood, did you have a follow-up? Are you okay? Very good. Councillor Andrews.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Bramley, thank you very much for being here. Looking at the report, when I take a look at the fines, are there examples in other municipalities, and I know you've done a lot of work to come up with this framework, are there examples where the punitive increases on a scale after the second occurrence? Because there are those anomalies where something like this can happen, but there are other examples where the fine could be higher than $300.
Thank you, Councillor. Deputy Mayor, through you. There are other municipalities who do increase these fines in an incremental measure. Again, this is not to be meant to be a punitive nature. This is a purely cost recovery and administrative cost, as these fees are coming back towards us through the OPP, that when they show up, this is a fee for service. We will be charged for this fee on every occurrence. And that secondary increment that we have included includes time for our staff to be an administrative fee. So it is 100% a cost recovery, and it can't be used going against a property against their taxes, as it's not punitive in nature.
Very good. Council, you're good? Anyone else from council? Just a few thoughts from myself, and if that's okay. The idea behind this is we were seeing the escalation of our calls for service, and that was by design, because through the OPP and this council, we were all encouraging our residents to contact the OPP if they had concerns or if there's anything unsafe, that they should report it. Unfortunately, to pay for false alarm bylaws makes no sense whatsoever. We have to go on a cost recovery basis. And that's why I think that this whole initiative is very important. So I wanted to give that as a thought. And then the other piece is just for yourself and your team to know, James, the OPP does have this bi-monthly as well. So I don't know if that would increase the accuracy, but I think it would increase the timeline. You know, if you contact someone and it was 3 weeks ago, or if you contact someone and it was a week ago, you know, it can make a big difference. So maybe taking the OPP up on getting it bi-monthly as opposed to it might make sense for your group. It may be extra work, I'm not sure, but something for you to consider.
Absolutely. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Okay, so the motion is written in the agenda that report PM 2024-006 false alarm bylaw be received for information. Could I have someone do that? Councillor McIntosh, Mayor Post, all in favor? Very good. Thank you, everyone. So that brings us to item 8.2, procedure bylaw midterm review, PM 2024-008. Anyone who would like to speak to this matter can call 289-801-5774 and enter conference ID 140845418#. Callers will be invited to provide their questions or comments following the conclusion of this meeting and presentation. Any member of the public connecting via telephone is reminded to press star 6 to mute and unmute. And anyone who wants to be notified of further consideration of this topic to submit their name, phone number, mailing address, email address to clerksdepartment@orangeville.ca or call 519-941-0440 extension 2242 and reference procedure bylaw midterm review PM 2024-008. Note that any information collected is a matter of public record. So at this time, I'd like to call on our town clerk. Raylene, are you on board here? It's over to you. Certainly.
you, everybody. So we're doing a midterm review of the bylaw. As a brief history for the timeline, you'll notice that our slides look pretty similar, coming from the same department. Council passed the current procedure bylaw in July of 2017. Then in 2022, the 7 of you were elected. On September 11th of 2023, approximately 1 year after the election, council made some amendments to the current bylaw. And now here we are in November of 2024, the halfway point of your term of council. And it's a best practice to review the procedure bylaw at the halfway point and see if there's any changes. Staff are presenting a couple of minor changes to the procedure bylaw at this point. There was already some changes done last year, as mentioned previously. So the only things that we're presenting today are inconsistencies that we found with the Municipal Act, procedural issues that we have encountered so far this term to clean that up, and items recommended for inclusion by the clerk due to best practice suggestions or current processes that we're undertaking. As a review, Section 225 of the Municipal Act states one of the roles of the head of council is to provide over council meetings so its business can be carried out efficiently and effectively. The procedure bylaw is the tool that assists council in having efficient and effective meetings, but the tool is not only utilized by the chair, but for all members of council to make sure we're all meeting here in an efficient manner. So there's a few proposed updates for you guys to consider today. The first one is in relation to public notice. The current wording provides that copies of all council and standing committee meeting agendas are posted in the notice case outside. Our council agendas are sometimes 300, 500, 700 pages long. So we wanted to just change that to notice so that it's just clear that everybody knows that notice of the agenda and how to access it will be posted there. And then the other part that's being added was whenever possible, agendas for council meetings shall be published at least 3 business days prior to the meeting. There's nowhere in the current procedure bylaw that says what we're actually doing, which is publishing the agenda on the Wednesday prior to the Monday meeting. So we would like to have that included so that there's an expectation that we're being held to. And then as well, any addendums to the agenda shall be updated and posted to the website by 1 p.m. on the day of the council meeting. In the 2023 revision, there was a clause that mentioned these addendums and this timing, but it was inadvertently removed when they made a different change in relation to that. So we're just kind of putting that back in there so the public knows what's coming up. The next item is method and technology. So currently, if a stream goes down and there's no alternative in place, the meeting could be deemed to be an illegal closed session if people were only attending via the virtual stream. So what the proposal that we have here is to add in 3.10.4 that if at any time the stream for a meeting that is held electronically goes down, the meeting shall recess as soon as it is noticed for a minimum of 15 minutes to allow any participants watching the stream to either connect through telephone at the number listed on the current agenda for connectivity or attend the meeting location. So as you're aware, the agenda for our council meetings do have both the electronic connection as well as a telephone number to call and the location of the building. So if the stream does happen to go down, people can call in and that will still work for their connection. The next one is related to electronic participation. So physical quorum is no longer a requirement in the Municipal Act. The chair is actually the only position that should be absolutely required to be physically in attendance, as they have a role to maintain order and decorum in the meeting. All remaining required parties should be in physical attendance whenever possible. However, this addition would allow for extenuating circumstances to arise without the need to cancel a meeting. So what we're proposing here is that should we not have physical quorum, the meeting could still occur if we have quorum through a combination of virtual and physical means. The other part of this is that we wanted to include in there that the clerk and all members of council shall be present in council chambers whenever possible, so that it's not, it doesn't become the norm of electronic participation. And then 3.10.9, which speaks to physical quorum being required, we would remove that section. The next one is for the consent agenda. So the current wording states that the clerk can determine what is routine or general in nature, and that hasn't been the current practice. Staff I don't believe that staff should be the deciding factors on what council would deem to be routine or non-confrontational matters. That would be the decision of the council members to make that determination of what they want to pull from the consent. So we've been placing all items under consent and giving council that opportunity. So we just wanted to change the wording to reflect our current practice. For amendment motions, 6.12 says a motion to amend a motion before council shall be presented in writing. We don't do that. So we want to remove that section. It's all our motions are verbal in nature. Presentations, petitions, and delegations. This is the longest one, I think, the largest change. And this is basically just to clear up what is happening around this. We're not removing any speaking rights from any member of the public or from council. So we're changing it just so that presentations will be for staff, consultants, people that are acting on behalf of the municipality. Delegations would be anybody from the external requesting to speak to council. And then question period and morning of delegations would be combined into one section called open forum. This is just for clarity purposes. And because as it currently stands, you have your delegations who request in advance, provide their documents, all those things in time. And then we have another delegation, if they're speaking to an item on the agenda, they can let us know by 10 a.m. the morning of the meeting, and then an addendum is published and whatever. So we figured it was cleaner if we had that open forum process. So if somebody has a question during question period, or if somebody wants to speak to an item on the agenda, that's all done during the open forum section. So that would require separate definitions for each of those. And then there would be multiple sections that included in that section, which would all reflect that change. Restrictions for delegations. So I know I said we're not taking away any rights. There are some restrictions that we think would be beneficial to have. One of them being no sales calls. So we wouldn't allow people to stand up and do solicitation of services. The second would be no repetitive delegation. So if a person has spoken at a public meeting on the same topic and are wishing to delegate at a council meeting and are reiterating the exact same things that they've said, that can be stopped because it's just a duplication, which doesn't foster an efficient meeting. The third one is they're not allowed to speak on anything that's outside the jurisdiction of this council. And the last one would be a request that delegates speaking on any opportunity in the town of Orangeville shall be required to consult with relevant staff prior to submitting a request. This requirement to connect with staff first allows for efficiency because a lot of times staff can handle the request. If staff are unable to handle the request, then yes, it should come to council. However, it takes time away from the council meeting when it could have been handled outside of the meeting. Question period. This is just what I spoke to before, is the combination of question period and open forum. Sorry, there was some parts in there that I skipped over. Changing the wording, it says may speak for not more than 3 minutes. Except with the leave of council, and it would be replaced with shall be allocated 3 minutes of time at the delegate stand, after which time the microphone shall be turned off. That allows for the 3-minute timeline would be for the question and the answer to occur, not just the actual speaking time. And then, but council can respond longer than the 3-minute time, but the person would not have the ability to rebut that answer if the 3-minute timeline has been done. And then a new section will be added. No person shall be permitted to speak at the same meeting for which they are registered delegate on any topic. So if you've registered to delegate on topic A, you can't also speak at open forum on topic A. Notice of motion given prior to meeting. We just added on there along with supporting background information after a written copy of the proposed motion. So council provides the motion. A little bit of background information would be helpful for the other members of council to understand where the motion is coming from. Notice of motion at meeting, and that is just again that other section asking for that background information as well on that one. And then the last one is the changes to the headings to be reflective of the proposed changes in this report. So if there's any amendments to what's being proposed here, the proposed change in the headings would change as well. As mentioned earlier, this is just a midterm review. A fulsome overhaul of the procedure bylaw is scheduled to occur in 2026. So that this council will have an opportunity to review the procedure bylaw to have it in line for the next term of council. Any questions?
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. Is there any questions from the public on this matter? Yeah, please come forward. State your name and address. I think, can you just turn on the microphone, Ms. Jones? Yeah, can you try that again? Thanks.
Karen Jones, 23 York Street.
Very good. Please go
My
ahead.
Question is, I find it a little confusing. So like tonight, there's going to be public input about the accessory building. Then if this comes forward in council again, and if I say something this evening, does that mean I can't speak on it later on? How do you know what the person's going to say? Like, how do you determine that? They might come up with a whole other viewpoint and additional ideas. So I don't really like that aspect of that.
Ms. Martell, did you want to
If you
clarify
could
that?
clarify it.
Deputy Mayor. Saying the same things. Council can stop them and say, we've already heard this at the public.
Oh, almost just
Don't have any
like
new
per
information."
verbatim. Okay, all right.
If there's no new information.
But you're not just curtailing.
we're not saying-
Okay, all right, thank
Very
you.
good. Anyone else from the public like to speak on this matter? No? Is there anyone on the line, just out of curiosity? No. Okay, very good. How about council? Would anyone from council like to speak to this? Well, how about we work our way down? Mayor Post, or do you want to go last? Oh, you don't have anything? Oh, excellent. Councillor McIntosh, please.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. How about the public that asked the exact same question 3 or 4 councils in a row? Should we not be doing away with that as well? It's the same as a public meeting where somebody speaks and then comes here and asks the same question. We have people come here and ask the same question 3 or 4 councils in a row and get the same answer.
Be great. Anyone else from council like to ask a question? Yeah, Councillor Stevens.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Taylor. Mine is 7.8.3. No person shall be permitted to speak at the same meeting for which they are registered delegate or open forum. So you went through and you said they can't speak on topic A if they were a delegate. Can they speak on a different matter in the same meeting?
Ms. Martell?
Just not the same.
Okay, thank you.
No other questions from council? I have 2. Maybe we can just talk quickly about the 72 hours, and specifically I can see someone phoning the day of and saying, hey, I've got a little sniffle. I want to be, it's a new world now post-COVID, right? I want to be cautious and respectful, and I'd still like to join the meeting. I'm well enough to join the meeting, but I'm not sure I should be there in person. Is that taken into account, or are they just out, or how's that going to work?
For you. No, they would be permitted to join. The 72 hours is just a contingency, just to make sure that we are knowledgeable, that if you know in advance, I believe it does say in there, except for extenuating circumstances. So if you jump
Okay,
at
great.
time, that would be considered extenuating circumstances.
Okay, and if I may, just my last one is, I'd love to talk about who can address council. And specifically, I think that they should either be a resident or be a taxpayer. And those who are outside of our jurisdiction, unless there's a special circumstance, I don't see a reason for them to address this council. They should go to their own council or the provincial government or the federal government, not this council. Do you have a perspective on that?
Through you, I did consider it. It was something that we had talked about previously amongst staff. There would have to be some kind of validation method that the person was either a resident or a taxpayer, and how we determine that. We would have to be checking IDs when they come in, because not everybody owns property that would be listed in our tax roll, nor do I know if we have the ability to use our tax roll for those purposes. So that was one of the considerations. The other consideration is if somebody wanted to argue a fire, say, for example, a fire bill they received for an accident that happened within our town and our town offered them a fire bill and they wanted to come to council. That would be an example of where it could be somebody from outside that's not a resident or a taxpayer, but needs something from this council. So there's a lot of nuances to it. And it may be something that we look at in the fulsome review in 2026. But it was just too in-depth for this midterm review that we're doing right now.
Thank you for that. If I could, I'd prefer that it was looked at, and certainly happy to go for today, but I still haven't forgotten the days when we've had to have the police involved here and there was physical altercations and we had to be walked to our cars at the end of the night and just a bunch of silliness, and it was created by people who didn't even live here. So I would love to address this. Second to that is I'm really not interested in someone coming here and telling us how to spend our money when they don't contribute to how they spend the money. So as an example would be, I don't want to hear from residents of surrounding municipalities about how we should address our recreation centers when they don't contribute to the recreation centers. They use them, but they don't contribute in a financial way. So I really think it's important that we put some sort of controls in. And if I may, one of the ways that we do control is we just did that. And we always ask what their address is and where they live, what's their particulars. But I don't think it's a benefit to this council to spend their time or listen to things that are unsafe, quite frankly. And I'm seeing nods. So, I mean, I can't forget how that all went down, and I'd like to avoid it in the future. Yes.
So as you were speaking, we could do something as simple as them signing off when they apply to be a delegate, that they confirm that they are a resident of the town of Orangeville and put the onus on them to confirm that. And then if there's any extenuating circumstances, we could bring that before council to determine whether they're permitted to speak before they're given the floor.
That would be great. And if they were just part of question period and they declared they were from a different municipality, we would say that you're not eligible to speak on the matter. That would be great. Does anyone else on council want to talk to that? Or yeah, Councillor Sherwood, please.
So my thought is I'm fully in line with you about coming up and delegating and, telling us how to spend their money and stuff. But perhaps secondary, what we could do is just ask them to provide correspondence and we just read it as part of our package if they're from out of town.
That is excellent. Thank you. Yeah. CAO Smith.
Yeah, thank you for raising that issue, and we'll work with all the feedback we've received. I was thinking of situations where we may have somebody representing a county organization, that may not live in our community, but if they're representing the Dufferin XYZ, then it may be appropriate, but we'll take that feedback and incorporate some options for our final report.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you very much. Okay. Maybe one last time, any other comments or questions? No, seeing none. Okay. Motion is written in the agenda that report PM 2024-008, the procedure bylaw midterm review, be received for information. Could I have someone make that motion? Councillor Sherwood, Councillor Stevens. Any last comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Yes, thank you, everyone. So item 8.3, the town initiated official plan and zoning bylaw amendments, additional residential units and other zoning housekeeping updates. It's PM 2024-007. Anyone who would like to speak to this matter can call 289-801-5774 and enter conference ID 140-845-418#. Callers will be invited to provide their questions or comments following the conclusion of the meeting presentation. Any member of the public connecting via telephone is reminded to press *6 to mute and unmute. Anyone who wants to be notified of further consideration of this topic to submit their name, phone number, mailing address, and email address to clerksdepartment@orangeville.ca or call 519-940-0440 2242 and reference town initiated official plan and zoning bylaw amendments 2024-007. Any information collected is a matter of public record. So at this time, I'd like to turn the microphone over to Brandon Ward. And Mr. Ward, you have the floor. Thank you, sir. What's that?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Was it wrong? It's Larissa? Who is it? Oh, we have to talk about that? Okay. So, Oh, I see. I got it. I'm sorry. So council, I apologize, Mr. Ward. Prior to Mr. Ward speaking, we need to give Mr. Ward and Ms. Russell extra time. So they would like up to 15 minutes. Councillor Andrews, like to move that? Could I have a seconder? Councillor Stevens, all in favor? Very good. Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. Mr. Ward,
Thank
over to you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. We'll try our best to be brief. Before we get into the details on some of these amendments, I'd just like to give a few background remarks, if I could. So we would characterize these amendments into two general categories or themes, the first of which is going to address additional residential units. And to address this matter, we're proposing amendments to our official plan policies as well as implementing zoning framework. And I'll touch on that momentarily. The second item is characterized as zoning bylaw housekeeping amendments. Now, these are matters that arise on occasion with respect to more administrative matters of the zoning bylaw that we need to address. It could be issues that arise that don't really fit cleanly against our zoning regulations, or there's uncertainty about how they match our zoning regulations. It could be matters that are maybe unclear in terms of their interpretation that we come across, and we feel a need to initiate an amendment to clarify that or introduce new terminology. They're not intended to be overly comprehensive and in-depth by way of review. It's more administrative housekeeping by nature. So we'll touch on some of those in a moment. But with respect to the additional residential units, I think many will be familiar with this concept. They're commonly known as basement apartments, accessory dwelling units, bunkies, granny suites, you name it. They've garnered a lot of attention in the media and as well as upper levels of government as a real key instrument to address the housing supply crisis we're experiencing. And in doing so, the province in late November of 2022 introduced a bill or enacted Bill 23, which made some pretty substantive changes to the Planning Act, essentially allowing additional residential units as of right on any residential property in a serviced urban area. And what I mean by services is serviced is that the area has municipal water, municipal wastewater servicing available. So the province, by way of the Planning Act amendment, states that you're allowed to have up to 3 residential units as of right on any property containing a single detached, a semi-detached, or a townhouse dwelling. And it goes further to state that the municipal zoning bylaw can't regulate beyond requiring at least 1 parking space per additional residential unit. Municipality can also not regulate or prescribe minimum floor area requirements for additional residential units. So it's very strong provisions at a provincial Planning Act level. The Planning Act, as we know, it's really our rule book for planning law in the province of Ontario that prevails over any municipal zoning approach or official plan policy framework. And in doing so, the language states that any municipal official plan policy or zoning provision to the contrary has no effect. So essentially, we can't have zoning provisions that are more restrictive or prohibit that framework. So we need to amend our zoning and our official plan policies to align with that. We can't overstep or regulate things that we're not allowed to under the Planning Act, but we do have some flexibility to regulate certain matters. And that's what we'll talk about here today with some of the draft zoning provisions we have proposed for you. So with that, I think I'll turn it over to Larissa Russell. Larissa's our senior planner, and she'll talk a little more about not only the additional dwelling unit framework, but some of those housekeeping changes I mentioned earlier.
So to start, we're going to speak about the additional residential units, as Mr. Ward covered. We are doing an official plan amendment and an associated zoning bylaw housekeeping amendment. Our official plan amendment, OPA 133, will implement the changes, the provincial changes, and provide high policy direction. Our zoning bylaw will provide more detailed information. An additional residential unit will be defined as an independent self-contained dwelling unit that has its own kitchen, bathroom facilities, and sleeping areas, and is secondary or subordinate to the primary dwelling. We are proposing some specific policies. The up to 2 additional residential units being permitted, in addition to the main dwelling, are permitted in a detached, semi-detached, and townhouse dwelling. That's in accordance with provincial policy. They are also permitted in an accessory structure, again, in accordance with provincial policy, as well as the one parking space per additional residential unit. The town is proposing some additional measures to help implement these types of units. We are proposing a maximum of 2 bedrooms per additional residential unit. We are also requesting that additional residential units provide a 1.2 meter wide unobstructed pedestrian access to the unit, as well as a 40% lot coverage. In order to implement that, we will be providing two additional definitions, either an attached or a detached additional residential unit. An additional residential unit attached is one or more habitable rooms containing a separate kitchen and bathroom facilities and sleeping accommodations for the private use as a single independent housekeeping unit, which is contained within a detached dwelling, semi-detached dwelling, linked dwelling, or townhouse dwelling, which already contains a dwelling unit. So these images here provide some examples of either an accessory unit on a second floor or in the basement or as an addition to the back of an existing household. Then for additional residential units detached, it is one or more habitable rooms containing a separate kitchen and bathroom facilities, sleeping accommodations for private use as a single independent housekeeping unit that is contained within an accessory building located on a lot containing a detached dwelling, semi-detached dwelling, linked dwelling, or townhouse dwelling, which already contains a dwelling unit. So the images here show the types of units that will be considered detached, so either in the rear yard above a garage or as a self-contained individual unit without a garage. We're also proposing some additional zoning standards for these types of additional residential units. We're proposing a building height of 6.1 meters above a garage with 1.5 meter setbacks, or a 4.3 meter height where there is a 1-story detached structure with 1.2 meter setbacks. We are also proposing a 4-meter separation distance between any buildings on properties. This would allow for the maintaining of some amenity space in the backyards. So all of those items we are allowed to add to our zoning. They are not currently prescribed by any provincial legislation that does not allow us to put them into the zoning. All of the next topics will just cover any housekeeping items for our zoning bylaw. So I'll go through those. Those do not have an associated official plan amendment. So the first change we're looking at is in regards to recreational vehicles. We are just amending the policy to explicitly prohibit human habitation within a recreational vehicle, trailer, boat, and boat trailers. And we are putting in specific policies that these items are not considered additional residential units. And we are just going to restructure the relevant section to provide some clarity. The next topic of housekeeping is home occupations. We are going to add new types of uses, which are underlined on the slide. They include fitness, food preparation, baking, and light assembly or production. We are going to adjust the uses in the various classes. We have 3 classes within the home occupations, Class A, B, and C. Class A is permitted in all dwelling types as well as accessory buildings. Class B is permitted in semi-detached and detached buildings as well as accessory buildings. And then Class C is only permitted in detached. And the main difference between these classes is potentially items that are more noisy are only permitted in detached unit types. We are also amending the policy to increase the maximum area. Our zoning bylaw currently permits 25% of the unit or 30 square meters to be a home occupation, and we are proposing to increase that to 30% or 40 square meters. We're also clarifying the parking required for associated home occupations, one parking space for any non-resident employee, as well as one parking space for any personal service use. So that would be above and beyond the standard requirements for that dwelling type. Our next topic is electrical vehicle parking. The zoning bylaw can prescribe standards for electrical vehicle parking, such as an appropriate amount of electrical vehicle charging or charger-ready spaces. We are providing a new definition. A parking space electrical vehicle means a parking space equipped with or constructed to be capable of being equipped with an electrical vehicle charging device. We are proposing policies that relate to the EV parking spaces. EV-ready parking will be considered to have conduit and associated power supply to provide level 2 charging. So this image here shows you the difference between EV capable, which is just running the conduit. EV ready is what we are proposing, which is running the conduit with the wire and outlet to a terminal box. And then EV installed would mean fully capable spaces. So we are not proposing to go all the way with the requirements. Our parking space requirements would be a minimum of 40% for the total required spaces for multiple dwellings and a minimum of 20% of the total parking spaces for all non-residential uses. We are also allowing that up to 4 spaces of those required spaces may share an energized outlet, and that the EV-ready parking spaces count towards the total parking requirements for the site. They're not in addition to. Our next topic is accessible parking. We just want to add some information on the parking required and clarify how it's being calculated. In terms of the additional information, we are adding specific policies for accessible parking on non-residential uses, multiple dwellings, as well as townhouses on private streets. And then we also want to clarify that the accessible parking spaces are again counted towards the total parking required for the site. Underground parking, this has become a new topic for us in Orangeville. We don't currently have any zone standards that apply to underground parking structures. And without appropriate policies, we may run into issues on neighboring lots, disruption to some neighboring lands when they go to develop. So we are proposing that we would require a 1.2 meter setback to any lot line underground, except where the main building setback is 0 above ground. And that we would require a minimum depth of 1.2 meters to be considered an underground parking garage. Next up is loading spaces. The current requirements for loading spaces are a ratio of floors, as the ratio of floor space area is resulting in excessive loading spaces. When large industrial properties come back to us, they are required to add more loading spaces for additions. So we're clarifying and adjusting the policies to reflect the total gross floor area for the entire development, not any additions that they add. It would be all inclusive. So we are proposing no loading spaces for less than 300 square meters, 1 space for 301 to 2,500 square meters, 2 spaces for 2,501 to 7,500 square meters, and then 1 additional space for every 500 meters when the building is above 7,501 square meters. We are also proposing some changes to encroachments. We have several encroachments in our bylaw right now. These are added encroachments, 1.8 meter rear yard encroachment for decks above 1.2 meters. We currently allow decks under 1.2 meters to be set back 1.2 meters to the property line. This allows for some of those higher decks to have some as of right permissions to build decks without needing to come in for a variance. Similar to 1.5 meters front and rear yard encroachment for balconies. 1.5 meter rear yard and side yard encroachment for below grade stairs. This we're adding, we usually get this in association with an additional residential unit where someone would like to construct a below grade staircase into their unit. We only currently permit 0.6 meters, which does not allow for the width of a staircase. We also would like to restrict AC units, heat pumps, generators, pool pumps, filters, heaters to rear and side yards. Like to clarify encroachment for awnings and canopies, that they're only permitted in front, rear, and exterior yards 1.8 meters and an interior yard of 0.6. And we're going to reformat the relevant section into a table to provide clarity. Right now it's a list, and we feel that a table would be easier to read and understand. As far as height exemptions go, right now we have an exemption. The exemption for silos and storage tanks is unclear. Silos which form part of a barn are exempt from the height permissions, but anything that's not associated with a barn, we'd like to clear that up, that yes, any silo is part of the height exemption, and we would just reformat this policy so that all of these items are listed in point form. Lastly, we will be making some mapping corrections and putting the holding symbols into a table. So we'd like to correct some of the mapping errors, mostly zone boundary adjustments that don't reflect the correct zoning, and then add a table where we document the removal of holding symbols and the removal of the conditions and the status of the removal, so that once a property is developed, we know that the hold symbol has been removed. And here's just a quick overview of our timeline. So we have drafted the OP policies and the zoning bylaw amendments. We have commenced our agency and public consultation. Today is our public meeting. From here, we'll take any feedback that we receive from the public, council, and any of our agency circulations. We'll amend the policies and then come back to council for an adoption of both the official plan amendment and the zoning bylaw amendment, hopefully in Q1 of 2025. I think that covers it.
Very good.
Take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Russell. I think before we go to questions, we go to our delegate is up first. So at this time, I'll introduce Rob Strang. And Mr. Strang, really nice to see you, former councillor. Great when former councillors come back and advocate for their community. Welcome. Good to see you.
Thank you. Like the new digs. It's quite different.
Horse and buggy when you were on council, I think.
It was. Yes. So my name is Rob Strang. I live at 5 Feed Street in Orangeville. And I'm here just to talk about prioritizing level 1 charging infrastructure for electric vehicles. And as we know, there's a limited charging infrastructure. So I think our plan should be to ensure that as many people as possible have the ability to charge an EV. At least a level 1 charger at their personal parking place, whether it's a home or a multi-unit residential building, or whether they're a renter or owner. Now, I brought a prop. This is a level 1 charger, and as you can see, it plugs into a 100-volt outlet, and almost all models of electric vehicles and plug-in vehicles come with one of these. You don't have to buy them. I think Tesla's the only exception, and they used to, but every EV can be charged with the level 1 charger. And now I have just in that chart there that you have in front of you, I've kind of looked at, there's sort of 3 basic approaches to installing charging in the community. The one on the left is having level 1 chargers at everybody's overnight parking spot. Second one, the middle one, is having a level 2 charger at everybody's overnight parking spot. And of course, level 2 takes 240 volts and 30, 40 amps or more. The other approach would be to have public chargers level 2 and level 3. And level 3 take 480 volts, a lot of amperage, so a lot more infrastructure changes. Now, I don't have time to go over all 3 of these columns, so I'm just going to go down the level 1 and tell you the sort of the advantages of that. First of all, first and foremost, it's just basically in charging a 120 volt outlet. That's all we're doing because everybody has the charger themselves. Overnight, you get about 80, depending on the vehicle, about 80 kilometers of range in a 12-hour off-peak overnight charge with a level 1 charger. So admittedly, if somebody had a fully electric vehicle, had a 400-kilometer range or something like that, and if they were driving hundreds of kilometers several times a week, they would need to top up at a public charger for sure. But for most people, 80 kilometers is way more than what the average person uses. And if you're a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle owner like myself, that the total range on the battery is 80 kilometers, a level 1 does everything a level 2 charger can do in a 12-hour overnight period. And if you charged 12 hours, 5 days a week, and 16 hours on the weekend, in a year on a level 1 charger, you get over 30,000 kilometers of range. So it's what most people use. They're quick to install, minimum infrastructure upgrade, because all we're installing is these. Minimal cost to maintain, because we know they're basically maintenance free. As I said, they come with almost all model cars. If you're charging in your own parking spot, it's off-peak. So it's the cheapest power, which is essential because then it brings down the cost of owning an electric vehicle. If you're charging a public charger, you're not getting the cheapest electricity. Or if you're in a condo and you've contracted with somebody to put in one for free, you're paying a premium. And I've experienced 10 times the price at a public charger that I get overnight at my house. They're convenient to use. Basically, you park your car, you take 30 seconds, plug it in. It's in your own parking spot. It saves you going to a gas station every week or two. And in time, if we later have the capacity, level 1s can be upgraded to level 2s. But the priority is to make sure everyone has at least one of these so they can have a car, because in 2035, all cars are going to be electric. So everybody has the ability to charge it. I'm actually just imagine that if we did have every overnight parking spot in Orangeville with a 120 volt outlet, everybody could have an electric car. Plug-in hybrid electric vehicles like mine wouldn't need anything more. Some electric cars would periodically have to top up. That's what you have, a few public charger stations. If I had a condo, if you would just make sure everybody had a 120 volt outlet and then maybe a couple of level 2 chargers for top-ups, then that would be by far the most cost-effective, efficient way to do it. Our infrastructure generally, we'd minimize the cost dramatically. And we'd minimize demand because the demand curve on a level 1 is flat, So, the grid would be more efficient, which benefits us all. And actually, the transmission costs could possibly go down because if we're delivering a whole lot of power to unused off-peak infrastructure, so the cost per kilowatt of power delivered would be a lot less, which could actually lower our electricity costs, which would undoubtedly be offset by increased generation. But in conclusion, this approach is fair, it's fast to implement, it's efficient, and it reduces costs. And I think we could be a real leader in our community if we just took this approach. And I'm not saying to not install others, I'm just saying this should be our priority. It's first thing, give everybody one of these. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much, Mr. Strang. That was an electric presentation. Thank you. Council, any questions for Mr. Strang while he's here, or do you want to just let this go? Oh, yeah, Councillor Andrews. Yeah, why don't we go ahead now?
Are you, Mr. Chair? Mr. Strang, thank you. And again, I'm on the same page as a car enthusiast and taking a look at where we are today and where we're going to end up. An example that was highlighted in your report that you failed to mention are examples in other parts of the country. And for those of us who've lived in other parts of the country, especially cold Winnipeg, I know, Madam Mayor, you lived in Saskatoon. What was standard was in fact a 120 receptacle, so you could plug in your vehicle, make sure that the block heater was connected, and if you had the luxury of a timer or the type of vehicle, also would heat your vehicle so you wouldn't have a cold vehicle when you actually started it up. I really like the idea. I think that the question that needs to be addressed is, not the ability of our infrastructure to house it, it's the willingness of members of our community to also embrace the same philosophy. I think it's a matter of education. It's a matter of desire. Many homes in our community do have an outside receptacle. They also have a receptacle that may be in their garage. But one example that comes to mind is in the city of Montreal. I remember this one gentleman who actually was parking on the side of the road. He had to connect his extension cord to his apartment so that he could have his trickle charger, as he called it, his level 1 charger, charge his electric vehicle. Not to say we want to have a whole bunch of electrical cords, streamed out into our roads, but this is, I think, a prudent idea that I certainly embrace, and I'm not sure how this would be moved forward, but one that I think that makes absolute sense.
Very good. Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Any other comments or questions at this time? Thank you very much, Mr. Turing. Thank you for being here. If you could just stay and we'll see how the rest of the conversation goes in case we need to call on you again. Okay, very good. So at this time, is there any members of the public that would like to speak to this matter? Is there anyone on the phone that would like to speak to this matter? Anyone on the phone? Anyone in the public gallery? No? Council? Oh, okay. Never seen you before, sir. Can you please state your name and address, please?
Thank you. I'm new here. Matthew Smith, 38 McCarthy Street. In regards to the ARUs, the additional residential units, I noticed one parking space is being, I guess, pretty much mandated. Would it be possible to have that parking space become permeable pavement? Because as green space has to get paved over to accommodate the ARUs, and with stormwater management and the potential fees coming next year, it just kind of makes sense to align all that with permeable pavement if you have to expand your driveway.
Ms. Russell, did you want to speak to that? Or no?
Thank you.
Yes.
Through you, Deputy Mayor. In terms of permeable parking, we have driveway standards that these parking spaces would need to fit into. If you wanted to widen your driveway, you would need to go through a variance process. So we're not allowing additional parking spaces that are outside of the zoning requirements for the property. So it's not something that we can consider because we're not allowing additional spaces other than what's already permitted on the property.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Russell.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Any further questions from the public? No? Okay. Council? Yep. Councillor McIntosh, you go ahead. Very good.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Through your Deputy Mayor. Maybe I'm a bit confused. You mentioned motorhomes and things like that. How does that apply to, say, the Orangeville Mall? You've got some motorhomes that spend the whole winter there. You got some motorhomes that spend a week there or a couple of days. Can you explain the difference, or is it the same? Are they allowed or not allowed?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, essentially the provision would apply townwide. It's stating that any recreational vehicle, trailer, etc., regardless of where it's parked, can't be used for human habitation. Now, how we would interpret that is probably a matter subject to judgment and looking at the matter and what it's being used, how long they're there for, and so forth.
Councillor McIntosh, you have a follow-up?
Yeah, just to follow up. So somebody that parks at a person's house, for example, and stay a week, that would not be an issue?
Again, through you, Deputy Mayor, it comes down to interpretation. In zoning bylaw, like many municipal bylaw enforcement matters, it's complaint based. When we receive a complaint, we act on it. The bylaw enforcement group investigates it and determines what bylaw is being contravened, if anything, or if the bylaw is being adhered to, and would take action accordingly. So I can't say definitively a day, a week, is acceptable or not. The way the zoning is written or proposed, you can't habitate it.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Ward.
Thank you.
Councillor McIntosh, you're good? Okay. Councillor Andrews.
Yeah, thank you. Chair Taylor. I have a couple of questions and a comment, and I'll
Please.
start off with my comment. I want to thank both Mr. Ward and Ms. Russell for the work on this. And most recently, Ms. Russell did an exceptional presentation at the Affordable Housing Task Force on providing clarification on ARUs or ADUs. You know, it depends on who you speak to in the province. There seems to be, you know, the nomenclature is kind of, you know, the same. Having said that, the thing that really struck interest, and I just wanted to make sure that the general public is aware, there's a lot of interest literally across the province on this, and municipalities from north, south, east, and west are discussing this as we are in the public forum. The area of the accessible dwelling unit itself, or the accessory building, for example, a shed. We take a look at what is now standard that does not require permit. Anything under 160 square feet does not require permit. But if a homeowner had one that they thought that they would like to convert, that would still enable them to do so. Is that correct? As long as they followed the process of other required permits and bylaw and building requirements within our building department. Is that correct?
Mr. Ward?
Sure. Thank you, Deputy Mayor, through you. So as soon as one wants to introduce a living space in the accessory structure, regardless of its size, et cetera, it triggers the building permit process.
So there's no minimum size. It is
under the Ontario Building Code, that I'm not sure. I just know from a zoning bylaw standpoint, we can't mandate a minimum floor area.
okay. Second question is pertaining to a section in the documentation you have, and I'll get to my comment in just a moment, but this is a little bit further on. It is on page 84, and this is in regards to properties that are utilizing their dwelling for various business activity. And I zero in on this section, which is highlighted under the letter F. A maximum of one employee who is not a resident of the dwelling may be permitted. Now, there are some home-based businesses where you have a rotation of staff. Does that now negate that opportunity for them to have a rotation of staff?
Mr. Ward?
Yeah, through you, Deputy Mayor. I don't think that's the intention of the bylaw. I think the way the bylaw is operating here is we don't want multiple employees on site at a given time. If there's, you know, one there and they come in on rotation, I don't see the bylaw intervening and prohibiting that.
Okay, just wanted that clarification. And now a comment, Mr. Chair. An example through dialogue that's taken place across the province. Most recently, we had a housing summit that was held in the Orangeville area. Would have been, I guess, 2 Tuesdays ago. And this was regarding possibility of incentivizing ARUs or ADUs. One that came to mind is the city of Barrie. Under their community improvement plan, they are providing up to $15,000 per resident that actually puts in an application for an ADU. Is that something that we could think about? Because I know our current structure of our CIP is focusing on our business community, you know, supporting our business community, the industrial side. But it really caught my ear because one of the things we're trying to do is, in fact, increase the housing stock. In your opinion, would this be something that could be considered, Mr. Ward or Ms. Russell?
Mr. Ward?
Yeah, through you, Deputy Mayor, it's something that can be considered. You mentioned the community improvement plan. We have one. It's fairly new from 2022. It's very economic development and business focused. If council was interested in pursuing something like this to look and shift focus towards residential enablers in terms of like additional residential unit provisions, I'd have to go through an amendment to the community improvement plan. That's a comprehensive process. It follows a similar route that you would for an official plan amendment, sort of a comprehensive background review. And there's obviously many considerations we'd want to go forward with in terms of budget considerations and so on.
Well, Mr. Ward, thank you for that. Lastly, I just wanted to say that with the Affordable Housing Task Force, there could be a possible recommendation as we come forth with that report, but I'm not sure if our CAO Smith is going to comment to that. Or
Yeah, very good. Thank you, Councillor Andrews. We'll go to CAO Smith. And
thank you. I just wanted to build on something that the manager planning said, and I think it would be appropriate in the near future, not tonight, but in the near future, if Mr. Ward brought a report back to council on the uptake of ARUs currently. Incenting them is an option. we may have hundreds of them in the queue already happening. So it may be something that needs to be incented, or it may already be happening. So I'd ask Mr. Ward in the near future to bring an update to council on the uptake of them in our community.
Very good. Councillor Stevens?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Taylor. Just wondering if our staff can comment on what the delegate brought forward. I'd like to know if that's part of the planning process now.
Mr. Ward?
Sure, through you, Deputy Mayor. So we'll certainly take that back into consideration as we go forward with that, especially that EV charger provision. Our understanding is the level 1, as we heard this evening, is purely a typical outlet. Our understanding of that may even be a building code requirement to include that sort of outlet supply in an existing garage. So we don't want to have the zoning bylaw interfere with that and possibly mandating regulations that are already spoken to under the building code or the electrical code. So having said that, we wanted to keep this focus more on the commercial sites, the industrial sites, new construction going forward, and the mid-rise residential product.
Okay. Mayor Post.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Andrews already asked part of my question, which was about an incentive program. But the other piece to that, I think, is perhaps a better deterrent from people building illegal basement apartments, for example. And I think having an incentive program of some sort to incentivize legal basement apartments as well as detached ARUs might be an appropriate step. We know that, especially during the election time when we were knocking on doors, we were hearing in certain neighborhoods specifically where illegal basement apartments were being built at a rapid pace and were causing all sorts of other issues in the neighborhood, like parking concerns and other concerns in the neighborhood. So it would be nice to see if there was a plan forward to address some of that and to incentivize folks building legal apartments instead. Additionally, I think that it's interesting in some municipalities that there are existing pre-approved layouts that make it easier to get through the process of ARUs. And I think that would be something that from our perspective, we could be leaders in trying to incentivize them being done more rapidly. I know there's some frustration around the planning process and how long things can take. And if there's anything that we can do to reduce a little bit of the red tape and make it easier, that also, without being a monetary incentive, can be a significant incentive in moving these forward. So that would just be a couple of my comments. I think we're on the right path, but I think that we could go a little further just to continue to incentivize.
Mr. Ward, did you want to speak to that?
Sure. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. If I could, we do have a policy as part of the draft official plan amendment that speaks to council support towards certain measures that maybe don't find their way into zoning provisions, but an example of which being development of an additional residential unit registry program. That's a good tool that would sort of make more awareness to units that are legal. If you're looking at a unit and you don't find it on the list, it's probably hasn't gotten the proper prerequisite building permit approval. So that's an initiative I know our building division is working on and a good incentive and dissuasion tool as well.
Very good. Yes, please, Mayor Post.
That is great to hear. On top of creating issues, it is a safety hazard for folks who are looking at renting. So thank you for that. That's really good information.
Very good. Anyone else? Okay, I'll just be real quick. My thoughts are, like, when I think about all of the rules and regulations, and it makes me ponder how many people within Orangeville would qualify within this. Do we have any idea of how many potential sites that we would have that could potentially be that way? Like, I think, like, I don't know what the average yard would be, but 36 to 40 foot wide lots would be sort of the new buildings. It's going to be hard for some folks, right? Mr. Ward?
To you, Deputy Mayor, it's difficult to gauge.
Yeah.
There's such a breadth of property sizes and configurations. I will say anecdotally that I've understood that the townhouses, that sort of unit type can be a challenge just by way of, their confined dwelling footprints, lot areas, fitting a suitable detached structure on those properties, meeting adequate separation, and the accessibility piece can be a challenge. And internally, then it becomes a question of parking that can be seen as an issue with that unit type.
Gotcha. And if I may, just one other one. So there seems to be a divide when I talk to folks about, yes, they want those buildings, but the concern is about providing water and washrooms, and why wouldn't they just come to the main the main area. I mean, if it truly is a family dwelling, which it obviously it could diverge into something else over time, but I think folks are struggling with the idea that they could build a structure, but to put and hook up to the city water would be cost prohibitive in lots of ways. I want to be clear. I think that they should. I think that they should have hook up to city sewage. That should be part of what they're doing. But I'm just curious what your perspective on that is and what you would say to folks who thought that they didn't have to do that and how it would work and any kind of financial thoughts. It's sort of a meandering question, I know, but it's an inflection point for sure in the conversation.
Sure, thank you. And to you, Deputy Mayor. So this exercise is focusing on those independent living units, ones that may be rented out. And we want very much so for those units, if they're accessory structures, to be included on the municipal servicing network. In terms of living space within, that's maybe not independent, it's integrated as part of the household. That's different. It's not subject to this terminology of the bylaw. I do know that there are still building code requirements for those units. It may be different from that which apply to independent living spaces. And sometimes what we have is challenges where if you have let's say we call it an in-law suite that's gone through the right channels, you have a new owner come in, they want to demise it and rent it out separately. And that can create challenges because now you've got a rentable space that's not really set up by building code permission.
Mm-hmm. If I may, what is the largest size of a building that we can build currently without a building permit? Is it 12 by 10 or 12 by 16? It's in that range. 10 by 16? Don't need a building permit. Yet that could be converted. I'm just wondering how we're going to get around this as time goes, right? So A, we wouldn't know they were there because we didn't get them to have a building permit. And then B, what would we do about the sanitary nature of how that would all work?
Yeah, again, to you, Deputy Mayor, regardless of the status and the size, if the structure was constructed and it was exempt from that building permit route, if somebody wanted to convert that to a living space, they've got to get a building permit to get that change of use.
I understand that, but they may not, right? And that'll be that's where the rubber is going to hit the road in this discussion. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. Oh, Councillor Sherwood with the last word, please.
Yeah, I woke up here. Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. I was just going back to the thinking about the additional residential unit. And Larissa mentioned several times in your presentation that it must have a kitchen, a bathroom, a bedroom. And I'm thinking like if you put an accessory unit in the back, and kind of what made me think of this when Deputy Mayor was talking about is a family member may not want to put a kitchen in that unit. They would be having meals in the house. So is it going to be a requirement that an additional residential unit has to have a kitchen, a bathroom, and separate bedroom?
Mr. Ward?
Yeah, through you, Deputy Mayor. Yeah, that's the proposed provision. And the reason behind that is because it's intended to be an independent, self-contained. If you have an internal sort of subordinate living space that's, again, an in-law suite, we call them, you may have something like that. Maybe the owner doesn't want to have a kitchen as part of that or whatever. That wouldn't qualify as an ARU per se, additional residential unit, because it's not independent.
So just to follow up, so to clarify, if say I'm my basement, I chose to put an elderly, my parent, and if I didn't put a kitchen down there, but I had a bathroom and I had a bedroom and everything, that's not going to be considered an accessory.
Correct. It would not qualify as an additional residential.
Okay, so we could typically do that and then still have two more. Oh, okay, thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Councillor Sherwood. CAO Smith?
Yeah, I'll just build on something the manager of planning said earlier. ARUs were prescribed by the province. It's as a right, but along with that, the province also dictated minimum expectations. So it has to meet the building code. So that there's specific, it has to hook up to sanitary, has to hook up to services. So there are things that the province is dictating as well as part of the right of having an ARU. So those wouldn't be under the control of our staff. It's provincial legislation.
Very good. Okay, thank you, Mr. Smith. Everyone good? Councillor Sherwood, please.
All of a sudden, I'm coming alive here. Oh,
Yeah.
the brain's just going. Not to put you on the spot, Mr. Coco, but I see you're in the gallery, and I was thinking about the EV and the delegate mentioning about, say, if every single household were plugging in at night their cars, would our system be able to handle that? Sorry, Rob, about putting you on the spot. But say we have, I'm going to guess, say we have 11,000 households, but if everyone plugs in at night, like, are we going to be lighting up here or what? Can we handle Mr. Coco?
Let's see. Is the mic on? Wonderful. So hi, Rob Coco, President and CEO of Orangeville Hydro. So to answer your question through you, Deputy Mayor, thank you for the opportunity. It's sort of like, it depends. Always the engineering answer. Sorry about that. But with that said, it's with electric vehicle charging, we also, from our planning perspective, I'll answer your question directly. Of course, it would cause issues, but it's also that sort of in any city, if everybody flushed the toilet at the same time while running all the sinks, it could cause issues for your water pressure, it could cause issues for your sewage treatment plant if all of that happened at the same time. Everybody flushed in New York at once. What would happen to their infrastructure? But in the real world, people have different time or doing things differently. We don't all cook at the same time. We don't all, our fridges aren't all running at the same time. They cycle on and off. And so with electric vehicles, as they come, not every electric vehicle will be charging at the exact same time, always. There will be some on the road. There will be some charging it, have a full charge and won't charge at full capacity sitting there in the parking lot. And so when we plan our grid, we look at historical trends, hard with electric vehicles since they're newer technology, but we build in for one house, we need to be ready for that vehicle to charge and all that equipment to be on. But then we start to normalize that curve as we build our infrastructure. So yes, if everybody ran their AC and their heaters and their stoves and their electric vehicle all at once, of course that would cause issues. But in the real world, that just doesn't happen. There are certain pieces of equipment that we do need to plan for all at once. Air conditioning units all run on the hottest days of the year. Sometimes you can't even keep up. Feels like it doesn't turn off all day. As heat pumps come online, it'll be the same thing, that on the coldest days of the year, those heat pumps will all be running. But with electric vehicles, it'll be a level 1. If everyone had a level 1, then yes, that 1.2 kilowatts would be utilized by all of them. So this is the challenge we have. With that said, regardless of what goes on with this decision for Town of Orangeville zoning requirements or what's going on at Queen's Park, with Bill 199, NDP and MPP has brought back building code requirements, proposed building code requirements. It's only gone through the first reading. If that bill passes and it goes into the building code, or with the tri-county work going on with the green development standards right now between Dufferin County and 2 other counties with EV readiness requirements, regardless of the decisions that are made by those different levels of government, it's not putting EVs in driveways, right? That's coming no matter what. As the delegate said, 2035 is coming, 2050 after that. So we're preparing for, to be honest, whether level 1s are coming sooner, we need to start thinking on our end, and are thinking on our end at all levels of the electricity stakeholders are in the planning side of things, that level 2s are coming everywhere. We're still learning and trying to skate to where the puck is going, is how big are level 2s going to end. 3 years ago, we'd be saying we're planning for 6-7 kilowatts. We're about to install in our shop, and they're readily available. If you buy a Ford Lightning, you get a free 16 kilowatt unit. So we're planning for that regardless, because even if we, as the delegate said, great to get to level 1s for everybody at the start or whatever that may be, we're installing infrastructure for the next 50 years. So we're planning for it, no matter what goes on in this room. We know that it's coming. And so if we install in a new development now, even if that builder's only putting in a 100 amp panel, the wire to the house is ready for 200 amp. The transformers are larger than they used to be. The upstream conductor is getting ready for that capacity. So we're skating to where the puck is going regardless. We're monitoring the system as a whole and understanding that we might need to get our additional feeders into town earlier than previously planned.
Okay,
Well,
thank you, Mr.
very much for that gruesome response. You were very well prepared for that.
I was
Me
gonna,
putting you on the spot.
I was gonna suggest, is that the brief answer or is there something more elongated you wanted to share?
You know me, I'm good. Deputy Mayor, there's no
Very
brief.
good. Councillor Sherwood, you good? Okay. Any further comments one last time? Very good. Okay. So at this time, the motion written in the agenda that PM 2024-007 Town Initiated Official Plan and Zoning Bylaw Amendments, additional residential units and other zoning housekeeping updates be received for information. Could I have a motion, please? Councillor McIntosh, Councillor Stevens, all in favor? Yes, that motion carries, and I will pass the chair back to Mayor Post.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Taylor. We will head right into bylaws. There's only one today. It's our confirmatory bylaw to confirm the proceedings of Council of the Corporation of the Town of Orangeville at our public meeting held today, November 25th. Can I have a motion, please? Councillor Sherwood and Councillor Stevens, all in favor? And that is carried. And a motion to adjourn. Councillor McIntosh and Councillor Andrews, all in favor? And that is carried. Thank you for joining us tonight.